Bible study notes covering Genesis 9 through 12. Genesis chapters 9 through 12 move from the aftermath of the flood to the beginning of God's covenant, worked through Abram. This section is a bridge between two major movements of Scripture, God's judgment and mercy in dealing with widespread human corruption. Genesis 9 through 11, and God's redemptive plan to bless the nations through a chosen family, Genesis 12. Together, these chapters show that sin persists after the flood, but God's grace and purpose persist even more. Genesis 9 opens with God blessing Noah and his sons and renewing the creation mandate. Be fruitful and multiply. This is significant because it shows that God has not abandoned humanity after judgment. He is committed to preserving life and order. God also establishes boundaries that protect the value of human life, emphasizing that people bear God's image. The sanctity of life is not a social ideal. It is a theological truth rooted in God's design. When God speaks about justice and accountability, he is reinforcing moral order for human flourishing. A defining feature of Genesis 9 is God's covenant promise never again to destroy the earth by flood. The rainbow is established as a sign of this covenant. Importantly, this promise is not earned by human righteousness. It is an expression of divine mercy. God's covenant demonstrates that he restrains judgment and provides stability for the world to continue. Even when humanity proves inconsistent, God's faithfulness remains steady. Yet the chapter also records Noah's moral failure. Noah becomes drunk and shame and dishonor enter his household. This moment is a sobering reminder that the flood did not erase sin from human nature. Even righteous people remain vulnerable to temptation and weakness. The response of Noah's sons adds another lesson. One exploits vulnerability while the other protects and honor. Scripture is teaching that spiritual maturity includes how we treat people in their most exposed moments, whether we cover them with dignity or use their weakness for harm. Genesis 10 traces the spread of Noah's descendants and is often called the Table of Nations. While it reads like a historical record, it has spiritual significance. It shows God's command to fill the earth being fulfilled. Humanity spreads into clans and nations, laying the foundation for the world as Scripture will describe it going forward. It also sets the stage for Genesis 11, where humanity's unity becomes motivated not by obedience but by pride. Genesis 11 describes the Tower of Babel, a major example of human rebellion. Instead of spreading out, people gather and seek to build a city and a tower to make a name for themselves. This is simply a construction project. It is a spiritual statement of self-exaltation and independence from God. Their unity is rooted in pride, fear of scattering, and desire for control. God responds by confusing their language and scattering them across the earth. This is not cruelty. It is corrective restraint. God interrupts the trajectory of unified pride that will lead to deeper oppression and greater evil. Babel teaches that when identity is built apart from God, confusion and division follows. The Genesis 12 shifts the entire story, where Babel shows humanity trying to make a name for itself. God calls Abram and promises to make Abram's name great, not for self-glory, but for divine purpose. God instructs Abram to leave his country, family, and familiar life. Abram is called to obedience without being given every detail. God offers promises instead: land, descendants, and blessing. Most importantly, God declares that all families of earth will be blessed through Abram. The statement is one of the most important in Scripture because it reveals God's global intent. The nation scattered at Babel will one day be reached through God's covenant plan. Genesis 12 also shows that faith does not equal perfection. Abram obeys God's call, but when famine strikes, fear leads him to Egypt, and he misrepresents Sarah. Yet, even here, God protects Sarah and preserves his promise. This demonstrates a key truth. God's plan is upheld by his faithfulness, not human flawlessness. God's mercy protects his purpose even when his people stumble. Overall, Genesis 9 through 12 teaches that sin persists, pride disrupts, and human systems fail, but God remains committed to blessing, redemption, and covenant faithfulness. God restrains judgment, establishes moral order, scatters prideful rebellion, and then begins a rescue plan that will eventually bring blessing to the entire world.